think some may join later, but thank you very much for your time. This is our fourth quarter and financial year-end investor briefing. We announced the results yesterday, so I'll just quickly go through. But before that, I've got my colleagues here as well who will be helping me answer some of the questions at the Q&A later. I thought I'll just go through briefly a presentation that just to put in context how we perform for this year, and then I'll go into each of the businesses and not too detailed, but just to tell you how we've done, and then we'll take Q&A after that. So for the financial year 2021, that was as of end of June, group revenue improved by about 6.7%. So this was a quite good top line growth despite the challenging backdrop. But bottom line was impacted by some non-operational sectors due to the closures. The results also was affected by higher impairments due to the closure of some of the businesses. Overall, international border closure affected the business, especially hospitality sectors. And I'll get into that in detail later. In the total result, the impairment was about 203 million that dragged the group's bottom line down. It's important to also remember that as an investment holding company, our performance is an aggregation of how all the companies perform. So, we do certain companies perform very well, like Food, Toto, and our financial services, and also Redtone did quite well over the last 1 year. But the impairment dragged down the overall results. Recovery rates of our business segment is at varying degrees, depending on what sort of business it is. I'll get into that later. But I think with some of the more positive news flow coming out over the last few weeks about more sectors reopening, we remain optimistic that perhaps better days are ahead of us, barring any U-turn in terms of closures. So going down deeper, property and financial services segment registered quite a good growth, about 42% and about 200% respectively. Loss before tax was about 190 million for the year. The recovery was dragged down from an operational perspective in the hospitality sector. We're not unique there. It's just the whole global industry has been affected, and in a way that segment as well has been quite varied depending on where our hotels are situated. And then our impairments was also really due to some of the closure of the non-core business. Not all our businesses were allowed to operate. Some will remain closed for a long period of time. Zooming in on the quarterly, the last quarter, fourth quarter, revenue declined by about 3%. And I think that was also because it was during the MCO period to about 1.75 billion. And also some of the overseas residence unit sales was a lot more slower. But the one outlier was obviously HR Owen, our luxury car business in the UK that did very, very well. And I think this was one of our best years for HR Owen. And also our overseas hotel occupancy in places like Iceland improved quite sharply. And why And why the varying degrees of performance is that in a lot of our overseas markets, we were given a furlough by the government, like UK and Iceland. So that helped mitigate some of our the cost issues there. whereas in other countries we had to support the operations for our hospitality. So now I'll just go a bit more deeper into each of the segments. Consumer products and services did quite well. A growth of about 16%. This was mainly contributed by HR Owen. We saw a lot of good sales from luxury cars over the last 18 months. And that's something that we foresee that we will continue doing quite well. Although the one outlier here, I have to say, is that we also did get a furlough from HR Owen. So that also helped mitigate some of the cost impact there. In terms of gaming operations, we were Toto was deemed a non-core operation, so we had to close our operations for probably about 4 or 5 months. So about nearly 4 to 5 months. So that was lost business for us there, and that was why the contribution there was lower by about 8%. Restaurants and cafes are quite interesting. It's been we were allowed to operate but not dine-in customers for a long time, and that is where I think some of the biggest operational turnaround has happened over the last several months. Within that business, Starbucks is still the biggest outlier. Continues doing quite well, but we have pivoted in terms of stores. There's been more drive-through stores that have opened. There's been a lot more stores outside the Klang Valley that has opened as well. And as we keep on tweaking the store format and just trying to just improvise as we expand the stores. We have over 300 stores now, and that continues. We will continue adding about 20 stores every year. The other food brands as well has gone through a turnaround. We continue growing Krispy Kreme. For the longest time, it was deemed to be a very much Klang Valley kind of brand, but now we've been growing that outside of Klang Valley and doing quite well. And all the other brands have seen a turnaround as well. Some of the things that we have done is reduce the number of stores, operate more out of cloud kitchens, and also reduce the size of the stores as well. So obviously, this MCO has given us an opportunity to have a rethink about how customer footprint pattern comes in, and we've tweaked that more and more. So that continues to be a part of the business that we are optimistic will continue doing quite well. Property investment and development, we had a nice run there, increased by about 40%. This was contributed mainly by the sale of some residential units in Vietnam, which we are in the kind of a final stages of selling out. So we got a nice gain there. Hotels and resorts, that's the biggest crunch for us. We've declined by about 40%. And some overseas hotels have done a bit better over the last few months because they've been allowed to reopen with no quarantine, like Iceland, and UK will reopen tomorrow after the furlough ends. Whereas in Malaysia, where we did not receive any sort of furlough assistance, it's still been quite tough. I think the key indication there will be when interstate travels are allowed. We do expect that to pick up quite sharply. Financial services did very well. Again, this was a beneficiary during the MCO where the stock market trading went up quite substantially. So our stockbroking business and also our fund management business has done quite well. The fund management especially is nearing the 1 billion ringgit AUM stage. And I think about 2 years ago, this was probably at about 100 to 150 million. So that's seen a very nice surge for us. And it's also a good business that, it's more recurring income and fee generation business. The financial position as of end of the financial year end 2021, I won't go in detail of this. Our total assets are about slightly north of 20 billion, with a cash balance of 1.1 billion on a consolidated basis, with a current ratio of slightly over 1 time. So a recovery will really be driven by a few factors for us. I think one is, as I said many times over the last few months, that we really need to be focused in terms of our business that we have, and also really having a rethink about what is really our strength. We have, when we presented our strategic plan a few months ago, been very clear about what is core and non-core for us, and that is where the focus comes in. And as an extension of that is the business rationalization, which is undergoing, where we've started talking to various parties about disposing of some of our businesses, big and small. Obviously during the pandemic, because of closures of the business, it also forced us to have a look at our cost management as well, and we have brought down the cost. Some was due to the hospitality, where we've had to kind of reduce the manpower, as well as more operational efficiency stuff, where we've been trying to kind of streamline systems and doing all that sort of work. Moving forward, I said that the strengthening of the corporate governance and leadership of the various businesses and within B Corp as well continues to be a focus as we look into putting much more succession planning and also putting in processes to make sure that the right governance structure is there, and we're keeping up in times, obviously. Streamlining the business, to have a much more cleaner holding structure. And obviously one of the big issues in the past with B Corp, which I'm very familiar about, is that companies are 2-3 layers down, and that is something that we will streamline when the right time comes. And then obviously improving some of the operational efficiency. So we've been making sure and looking at what digitalization can we do to reduce the number of people within the group, and just looking at where we can improve even further. Where are the duplications in the group that we can eliminate? What are things that we really need to do uniquely separate versus what we can do shared, and just looking at all those sort of things. So the outlook over the next 12 months, and this was the chart that we showed everybody. It's the recovery would be at various stages. So if you look at retail, where we've kind of bucketed food and non-food, because essentially it's very interrelated, maybe with the exception of luxury motor distribution, which is a bit not related to food. But the ones in green is a traffic light system. One in green is where we expect recovery to happen very quickly, or to already see recovery happening. So the food business will continue doing quite well as dining is allowed, and we're allowed to take on 100% capacity. HR Owen continues doing quite well. Our environment business was never affected because we do work behind the scenes, and it was always allowed to operate anyway, and it was always considered a core business. Our digital services as well would continue doing quite well. This is things like Redtone and things like minorities stake in Razor FinTech. It's also our data analytics company as well. And the one in yellow is where we expect some recovery, but it's very dependent on how the economic indicator needle moves. And this is typically property, where it's very tied to economic sentiments and all that. We do have a sizable land bank in property that's enough to keep us busy for a good 10 to 12 years. But always in property, it's a function of when's the right time to launch. And currently, it's not the right time to launch. So this will really depend on how the feel-good factor is. And then gaming as well would see some sort of recovery as people are a bit more comfortable going up. Why that is so is that our gaming, the regulations require us to only sell tickets via the outlets. So people need to physically be able to go out, line up, and buy those tickets. The ones that will see probably a bit more slower growth, and this is again, it can change because it's very much dependent on SOPs and everything, is things like hotels and consumer marketing. And this will take a bit of time. Hotels, especially the Malaysian one, would if interstate travel is removed, we could see a nice sharp short-term recovery. But the key is really reopening the borders, because we do rely a lot on foreign tourists coming in. This was a 3-year strategic plan that we announced. I won't go too much into it, but essentially, I showed you this house, which essentially is, as a holding company, B Corp is right at the top, and where I and my colleagues here sit. And then in each of those verticals in dark blue is all headed by respective CEOs of all these businesses. What binds all these companies together are those, profitability, governance, process, people, and digital. And then in each of those entities, we do have operational roles and strategic roles as well. And this is how we really see ourselves as a investment holding company. Some strategic functions would sit at the B Corp level, operational roles would sit at the company level. What are the priorities for this financial year, the one that we're in right now? The rationalization of the group is ongoing, and we are on target for that. We have already identified what is core, what is non-core, and I think we've kind of communicated that or indicated that, and that's on target right now. So we do expect to announce once we have signed all the legal agreements with the parties. The other one is, from an operational perspective, is thinking about post-pandemic recovery plan, because clearly as we start reopening, lives are not going to go back to normal. We need to think about whether there is any changes we need to do with regards to our food business, hotel business. And this could be things like, in hotel, for example, do we need to do cleaning 3 times a day versus once a day? Do we need to take a proactive stand in terms of limiting number of people, or do we go 100% occupancy? So these are all the things that operationally the team has been spending a lot of time thinking about, what's a safe, prudent, but also commercially viable way to kind of reopen. Secondly, improvement. I think cost is an important ongoing thing that we continue trying to look at ways. And a lot of this would come from digital efficiencies and trying to just eliminate some of the duplications within the group. Number 3 is putting in proper digital and people framework. Right? I always say that, we need to have a think about, as we start growing the business and moving to a post-pandemic recovery plan, do we need to have different kind of people? What do we need to do better and all that? So those are things that we've put in place. The other one is also, I guess, tighter performance monitoring with the companies, that we now, that at least I meet the companies now regularly, formally on a monthly basis now, just to go through some of their plans and numbers and all that. So there's a lot more, I guess, tighter oversight, if you'd like to call it, from B Corp to its group of companies. So I'll end there. I don't want to go too much in detail and think, but I'm happy to take Q&As on the results, performance, if anybody has any questions. Anyone use the option? Do stop sharing? Yeah, I think you should stop.
Yeah, why don't we go to the screen?
Stop sharing there.
Okay.
Any questions? You can either type it or you can ask. Yeah.
Time coming. Go ahead.
Hi, morning. Thanks for our presentation. I have a few questions. First, can you talk a bit about the Langkawi travel bubble? What is the occupancy rates of your Langkawi resort now? And what is the booking rates for Q4? And also, what is the average room rate now as compared to pre-COVID level?
Okay, yeah. Langkawi travel bubble, I think we decided not to open 100% occupancy because I don't think we were prepared for that. But I think, if I'm not mistaken, we were at about 30 to 35% when the travel bubble opened. Average room rate is 500. Yeah, I think our average room rate is about 500. Has it changed much? Not really. Pre-COVID and post-COVID. So rates haven't changed because there's been pent-up frustration, right? People want to travel. So that's not really been an issue. The issue really has been trying to get, I guess, people who are confident to travel will travel, but it's not as easy to travel as it was because people have to do swab tests and do all these sort of things. So yes, it's coming back slowly. So it's about 35% now.
Right, thank you. Can I also ask about the restructuring process? You talk about the streamlining operations to have cleaner businesses. So are you still mulling the idea over hiving off BToto?
Yeah, so like I said, all our businesses are available for sale for the right price, right? So we are in discussion with various parties for a lot of our assets. So when the right time comes, we will tell them. So we do get a lot of interest for some of our assets, so we do speak to them, and sometimes the conversation ends very quickly if the pricing is not right. And for some, we are in discussions, but obviously I would love to share more, but Bursa won't like me saying a lot. So we will announce when we have passed the legal stage.
Or maybe just let me rephrase my questions. Is BJ Corp a B Corp intention to disassociate from gaming business?
So can you repeat the question?
Is B Corp's intention to disassociate from the gaming business?
From sim business.
Oh, okay. It would, it is. We do want to be a disassociate from Toto. That's your question, is it?
Yes, BToto being a gaming business.
No, I don't think that there is a hard intention on that. Like I said, we are an investment holding company. We make our income from owning companies and selling companies. So if the right price comes, we would consider that, and that's the same line that we have for all our businesses as well. We're not going to get into a situation where we sell companies because we feel that, we don't want it anymore. We'll sell the companies if we get the right price for it, right? Although we've put some of our assets up for sale, like some of our hotel assets, we've been very clear we're not going to get into a fire sale. We know what price we want for each of those assets. So, if you're not getting it, we'll wait a bit longer. Yeah. So, we do know that we do have some very good assets. So we are open to a lot of things, either outright sale or stake sale, depending. So it really depends on the partner.
Thank you very much. That's all from me.
questions?
No.
Okay, so
Are there any more questions? You can type it in the chat box too. Okay. Okay. Okay, if there is none, then
There's a question in the chat box from Helen.
we can't see it.
Okay, so the question that was asked is, looking at your investment related expenses, do you foresee more impairments in coming quarters?
more impairments in coming quarters. Do we see more impairments in the coming quarters?
I'll let my colleague answer that.
We have done most of the assessment during the year end, so we don't foresee too much impairment going forward. But it also depends on the situation, whether you will worsen or not, or if it's getting better, then there's no need for impairment actually.
So one of the impairment expenses we took during this financial result that we announced was admin. And the admin impairment we needed to take was because they're in the duty-free business and they just could not operate for the last 18 months. So there was a need for us to take impairment. So, I think impairment is, you look at it two ways, right? There's some of it is you are writing down because you're closing down the business or something like that. To your question, that sort of impairment, we don't see anything in the future. But the other sort of impairment where businesses are not allowed to operate, like in the case of Adnan, that is something that we can't say no because it really depends on how the situation is in the future.
Okay, let's give it like a minute more, just in case.
How come you can't see the question?
The chat.
It's not coming up.
It didn't show up.
Okay. Right, I think there are no more questions in the chat also. So we will end this, right?
All right, thank you very much for your time. If you have any questions, you can. Who has the email?
Email.
Yeah, so if you have any questions, you can email us and we can get back to you. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.